No, you're not a real gamer. I'm so sick of all these people that okay, they're gamers. I see people saying, I put well over 100 hours into this game. That's nothing. Most of us can easily put 300 plus hours into our games. I see people who only have a Nintendo Switch and claim to be gamers. Come talk to me when you pick up a PS4 controller, then we can be friends. Also, dear all women, oh god, Pokemon is not a real game. Animal Crossing is not a real game. The Sims, not a real game. Mario, okay, we get it. Put down the baby games and play something that requires challenge and skill for once. Sincerely, all of the actual gamers. So this is problematic for many reasons, but I'm using this post as a jumping off point to discuss how this stereotype of what a real gamer even came to be. Is this stereotype even true? Why do we still hold these beliefs, and are they harmful? Hey you guys, my name's Asmara, and on this channel I'm all about embracing all that Black women are through gaming, creativity, and conversation. So today I'm giving you very your college professor. There is really no reason for me to wear this blazer, but I thought it was cute, and I haven't worn her yet. And we have the red lips, so real collegiate vibes today. There's a lot of contention about what this term gamer means and what actually dictates a real gamer. So let's go through a little bit of a history lesson, shall we? The first known record of the word gamer dates back to approximately 1422. It was built off of people who played games illegitimately, whether it was sports or whether it was tabletop games. When they said gamer, what they meant was gambler. The town's code of laws condemned any dice player, carder, tennis player, or unlawful gamer. In the United States, war games were used by the military to learn new tactics, but this form of gaming started to become more recreational in the 1950s. A publication called the War Game Digest referred to their readers as war game enthusiasts, war game generals, war game players, and most significantly, war gamers. When electronic gaming started to become popular in the 70s and 80s, the whole rise of gaming journalism popularized the term video gamer, and one of the first times we see it is in an article by Arcade Alley, who coined the term, and it eventually got shortened to just gamer. So now we're going to hop back into 2020. So what is a real gamer? A lot of quotation marks in this video. I actually got some of your guys' feedback in an update video I uploaded a few weeks back. It's probably been a month at this point by the time this video is going up. But I will be including your guys' opinions and feedback, and I really enjoyed doing this, so yeah, I can't wait to get into it. My initial thoughts is that when I searched real gamer on Google, I was pretty certain I was gonna find a lot of white teenage boys who were isolated in their room or in a basement, haven't showered for days, are kind of antisocial and just, But anyways, that was my thoughts of what was gonna come up when I searched gamer on Google. Going back to your guys' comments, I asked for your feedback, and I saw a lot of similar themes. I saw quite a few people say that historically the gaming community has been white, so white male was something that was often referenced. There's also an element of being discriminatory, insensitive, or racist. We have MI who says, the term gamer usually makes me think of cis straight men who are usually rude, extremely discriminatory, and spend their whole lives playing video games. I also found this tweet by Peachtrees who says, if you don't play Call of Duty or Overwatch and scream racial slurs at minority, you're not a real gamer. And obviously that's sarcasm, but I thought that was funny. Okay, but in addition to that, violence was something a lot of people stereotypically associated with the gamer. There's this tweet that says, people think that games should only be about killing. And then lastly, this one actually kind of surprised me, but I thought it was an interesting perspective. Somebody commented, to me, a gamer is somebody who does it full time for a living, or at least gaming supplements the majority of their income, which that's not something I actually thought about, but that is also, I guess, could be part of a definition of a gamer, somebody who games or develops games professionally. So this is what people generally stereotype gamers. But when I did search gamer on Google Images, I actually went into a whole new incognito tab. So I didn't have any search history on there, And I was actually kind of surprised that it was fairly-ish diverse. Let's do it right now. Boom. First image we have here. This is a female. She looks like she's, you know, got some melanation in her skin. So we already are off to, you know, a kind of pretty diverse start. Next one, this is, I think, our stereotypical, like, view of a gamer. We also have another white male. Can't tell this guy's skin color, but he also looks like he's playing some sort of first-person shooter. Roblox. Same. We also have another female. We also have, you know, the very gamery background with the LED lights. That's a theme. This looks like a team of some sort. And they also look like Asian or some sort of Asian descent. So, you know, some diversity. Oh, look a grandma. Okay. Japanese gamer grandma is YouTube idol at 90. Oh, I need to see who this woman is. Okay, but anyways, I was actually pretty, you know, surprised to see some kind of diverse images when I searched gamer. Even though gaming is becoming a more diverse industry, and I think most people, you know, sane-minded people acknowledge that gamers can be anyone of any race, of any age, of any ethnicity, why do we so collectively seem to like hold these beliefs of what a real gamer is? How did the stereotype come to be? Let's break it down. So the first element is typically white male, and to explain this, honestly, it's pretty straightforward. Like a lot of things in this world, when founded, the gaming industry was not very diverse. The people and teams that worked on these early games and gaming systems were predominantly white male. We have the first PC games, such as Tic-Tac-Toe, which came out in 1952, Tennis for Two, that came out in 1958, and Space War, which came out in 1962. All of those first PC computer games were created by white males. We have the first home video game system, the Odyssey, that came out in 1972, and that was created by a white male. We have the Atari that came out in 1972, which is responsible for establishing the first ever arcade game system, and that was established by two white males. More game systems like the Sega Genesis that came out in 1989, that was created by a Japanese man. I don't want to say his name incorrectly. Hideki Sato. We have the inventor of Nintendo in 1983. He's also another Japanese man. Let's look up how to pronounce his name. And then we have the inventor of the PlayStation, which came out in 1994, which was created by Ken Kutaragi. So yeah, Sega Genesis, Nintendo, PlayStation were all created by three Japanese men. And then last but not least, like the newest, I guess, modern game system we have is the Xbox, which came out in 2001, which was created by a team of mostly white men. So this is like the Mount Rushmore of gaming. For my international folks, like the founding fathers of the gaming industry. The only diversity that I really see is like a few Japanese people, still no women or black or brown people. And so this is what the gaming industry was founded off of. However, I do want to be clear, like any other industry, women and minorities definitely exist in the space, but their contributions are often overlooked, mainly for one of two reasons. Either their contributions may not have necessarily been directly in game or technology development itself, despite having other roles that still contributed to the success of a lot of these early video games, whether that's game journalism, marketing and sales, or game design art. Or if they were in game or tech development, if they weren't working for one of the mainstream companies, oftentimes these people's inventions couldn't contend with the notoriety and popularity of the Atari, the Sega Genesis, or other inventions by these white and Japanese inventors. And this can be due to a lot of reasons, namely lack of resources, money, and exposure, to name a few. But there are executives like Lila Zinter, who was one of the first female gaming company executives in the 80s. Jerry Lawson is a black man who developed the first home video game console to ever feature removable game cartridges. This was done a year before the Atari 2600 had even been released, with that same feature. Lawson also established Videosoft in the early 80s, which was the first game design company to ever be owned by an African American. His company actually developed games for the Atari 2600 because his own game console couldn't contend with the popularity of the Atari. But due to financial reasons, his company had to shut down in 1983. And there are so many more examples of women and minorities that have made great strides in gaming history, but aren't often recognized as being founders of this industry. I'll leave a few links to a few of these articles and papers in the description below if you want to learn more about these people. If you actually check out this quick clip from Sandu, he is actually like a tech genius. He's a coder. He makes algorithms and stuff for like Snapchat, Instagram, Uber. He addresses the problems with not having a diverse infrastructure from the ground up that naturally creates racial bias in the tech industry.
Right, so what happens is the people that first create that constitution, right, if they're not thinking from a diverse standpoint from the ground up, the merits are going to benefit a specific demographic group over another.
Yes.
Right?
And the effects of this is exactly what we're seeing happen in the gaming industry today. The original demographic of like who video games was targeted for is kind of complex. It's a modge podge of different things. There's like gaming as it relates to war and trying to find military tactics. That's obviously targeted towards veterans and military people, soldiers. But as arcade games began to become more mainstream and more popular, they were kind of just meant for the general public. Young people were attracted to video games. Maybe like young people tend to have more time on their hands, but I don't know if video games in particular were targeted towards a specific demographic, more so just a general public, new form of entertainment, way to pass the time sort of thing. The stereotype of violent and skill-based games, that can obviously be traced back to the history of video games, in that militaries used war games to, you know, find new military tactics. The first ever electronic video games like ping pong, tic-tac-toe, and Space War were all really just a result of strategy. I actually found this 20-page research paper. What do you do for fun? I read research papers, but this one is actually pretty good. I'm gonna be referring to it a lot throughout this video. It's titled, "What is a True Gamer? The Male Gamer Stereotype and the Marginalization of Women in Video Game Culture." So according to these authors, previous studies have identified these sort of genres as being real games. So things like shooters, massive multiplayer games, real-time strategy games, anything that has challenges, high difficulty, and strong visual reward for the player's achievement. Hardcore games oftentimes feature like negative fiction and is usually dark and violent in a setting like a Warzone. Sound familiar, huh? When video games first really became popular, they were all really just about strategy and playing to win. I forgot to talk about the racism, sexism, and just general discrimination part of the gamer stereotype in this section. And honestly, that more so has to do with the patriarchal and white supremacist society at large, rather than the video game industry itself. But the gaming industry certainly isn't urgently trying to resolve these issues within their communities, because let's take like voice chat games, for example. A lot of the players that make these insensitive comments, use racial slurs, and sexually harass women over voice chat have not been held accountable for their actions, at least not on a large scale. That's why this language is normalized in a lot of massive multiplayer games and first-person shooter chat rooms.
I feel like African American females get a lot of struggle in the game community when it comes to trolls and stuff, because we get called the N-word, plus we get called hoes and all this other stuff as well, being that we're females.
And it's certainly not uncommon for the women or black people who play these sort of games to decide not to use the chat room altogether, or if they do, they only use it to play with their friends.
The moment our voices come on to that headset, we might as well just prepare for Abuse Central. And that means half the time I'm gonna be on mute.
And I'm specifically using voice chat as an example of this type of discrimination, but racism, sexism, or bigotry of any kind can really be present in any game's community forums, within the game content itself, etc. So the discrimination is not mutually exclusive to any particular genre of game.
The default mode of black characters seems to be loud, aggressive, enormous dudes whose athleticism, strength, and masculinity are their defining traits.
Growing up in a world where you don't see yourself being represented in video games, magazines, TV shows can actually form a perception that is untrue.
It's about us feeling welcome in a community that we're a part of and not having to fight tooth and nail for the representation that some people just get automatically.
Exactly.
We're not even asking to win. We just want to stay at the table.
So those are just like a few examples of how people of color, black people specifically, have been excluded in various games and gaming communities. And although these may not be overt examples of racism, they're still microaggressions, therefore a subtler version of racism. But going back to my voice chat example, I do want to mention that with the wake of Black Lives Matter 2020, more gaming companies have felt pressure to address the racial harassment issues specifically in their communities. In June of last year, Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Warzone placed a Black Lives Matter statement to appear on the screen as soon as you opened up the game, so at that time, all players had to see this message before they could actually play. And although this may seem like a good gesture, many black Call of Duty players have seen this to be more of a social pressure than an actual commitment Call of Duty would make to put into practice within the culture of the game itself, because the voice chat racism still widely remains an issue today.
Come on now, like there's still going to be a lot of racists on there. You're not going to stop people from saying racist things because it's really not just with the usernames, it's with the voice chat. Like it's been like that since forever, as long as I can remember, as long as multiplayer games were able to be played online.
Call of Duty might as well just be a clan meeting. Like
I highly doubt this is going to change anything, but I will say on the other side, I found it very interesting that they actually put that in there.
Call of Duty developers did specifically release a statement that summer listing the steps they were going to take to crack down on racist behavior within their online chat rooms, but many black players still remain doubtful or skeptic that any real meaningful change will ever occur in the long run, mainly due to the ingrained culture of the game and its long history with essentially never doing anything significant about stopping racists, misogynists, bigots, etc. And then the last sort of criteria for what makes a real gamer is people who do it professionally. Of course, you know, if you have like video game developer or you're part of like the development process for video games, that's a part of your title and you could maybe say that you're a gamer that way. But also, of course, with the rise of the internet and more people like becoming streamers and like YouTubers and can make money off of, you know, sharing their gameplay, I think that's also another factor of how that identification became to be associated with a real gamer. So that's the historical breakdown of all the key elements that make up a real gamer, as well as the persistence of these factors within the definition of a gamer today. And although the gaming industry is becoming more ubiquitous and more people are generally aware that gamers are diverse simply because people are diverse, this ingrained imagery of what a real gamer is not only impacts how others may treat or perceive you if you don't perfectly fit into this imagined social construct, but it also prohibits a lot of people from proclaiming that term gamer for themselves. Why do people still struggle with calling themselves a gamer? I know this is something I definitely struggle with a lot. I decided to ask y'all, do y'all consider yourselves gamers? What has been your experience with this term? The factors I've noticed that typically prevent people from calling themselves gamers are things like the types of games played, their access to games, the amount of time they spend playing games, their gender identity, their race, or the intersection of a few of these or all of these. In the research paper, it says that hardcore gamers were proud to be gamers, whereas casual gamers did not consider themselves as gamers. So this is one category, like the types of games you play and whether society deems it as a hardcore game or a casual game. I think for me, I struggle to call myself, you know, a gamer and still kind of do, is because I don't really feel like I play real games. I actually saw this tweet from Spellcaster Sim, which I could not agree more with this tweet. He says, "To be honest, I hate getting asked what games I play. I feel like when I say The Sims, people laugh or say rude things because some people don't consider it a real game." So even if you game a lot with your casual game, people still kind of struggle with this idea of considering yourself a gamer simply because of your game is considered a casual game and not like a real or hardcore game. I think also the types of games you play could also be dependent on the access you have to video games. I think a lot of people don't really think of how expensive gaming really is and can be. Gaming consoles and video games are very expensive. Like you can pay $60 for a single game. I think in this world we want to define a gamer by how much like emotionally, physically, and monetarily you can invest into a game, but we have to recognize that not everybody has that privilege to be able just to spend money on all the games they want or all the games they're excited for. In addition to financial disparities, accessibility for people with disabilities is another important factor as to what types of games someone can play. Having features such as subtitles, large text, text-to-speech options, high contrast visuals, detailed sound, and adaptable game controllers all expand the audience of who can play what type of games. And I just named a few examples of accessibility features, but there are many more out there. But does that make me less of a gamer because I don't have that access to those games? It doesn't make me any less passionate about the games, and so that can also affect the types of games you play and whether or not you consider yourself a gamer. Another factor is hours spent into a game. Somebody in my comments, Sim Shy, hey girl, hey, she says that seeing as I work full time, am a mom of a soon-to-be 2-year-old, I really don't know if I can ever achieve that gamer status. I can't be up gaming every night. And that's something I definitely, saw as a theme, not just in the comments, but like in my research. Not everybody can spend all their time into the game, or the games that they like. We also have Nappy Goodness saying that she is a gamer at heart, but like bills and adulting kind of takes up a lot of her time, so she can't play as many games as she maybe wants. And so she says here that she watches people like Dashy Games play, which I think a lot of people who enjoy gaming also enjoy watching people on YouTube because time concerns or whatever else. So I definitely understand that. We have MI who says, I don't identify as a gamer, but somebody who just enjoys playing video games every once in a while. So that's another perspective of hours spent in a game kind of contributing to whether or not you consider yourself a gamer. So another aspect onto why people struggle calling themselves a gamer, and that is gender identity and sexism. I will say this has a lot of overlap with like casual gamers, or what, society stereotypes as being a casual game, but I think sometimes we just blanket women under this category. But yeah, we'll get into it, but I just wanted to clear that up. My research paper says of 176 self-identified gamers, only 14.4% were females, whereas 85.6% were male. Further, in a study of about 1,400 US teenagers, researchers found that only 35 of female adolescents identified as gamers, whereas 69 of young males did. MI continues to say that both me not playing games every day and the fact that I'm a woman contributes to me not using the term gamer to describe myself. And that's a theme I've definitely seen a lot, and that's definitely something I've personally experienced, as a female and as a woman who is in this gaming space. So that leads me to my next question. Why are women, generally speaking, typically more hesitant to assert themselves as a gamer? My research paper touched on a lot of really great points. The male gamer stereotype leads to a marginalization of women in video game culture. These spaces oftentimes become hostile to women. Obviously, we often associate, especially like those first-person shooter games or like where you chat with people online, can definitely be hostile towards women and also minorities, racial minorities. That definitely leads to like a negative sort of psychological effect on how women are treated in this video game culture, feeling unwelcome, isolated, or like a misfit in a hobby that is otherwise appealing. Even stronger than that are the direct negative psychological effects of verbal and sexual harassment directed at women. And kind of going off of that, of course, the study said significantly less females use the voice chat in video games compared to men. Some people in my comments were telling me that they were being sexualized on video games by doing absolutely nothing, for existing. People telling her to go to the kitchen. Just like examples like this, I think sometimes we kind of associate this sort of behavior, this sort of language with like young people who don't know any better, or like, trolls or whatever. But I still think like the fact that like racism and like sexism and like slurs and harassing people, the fact that that's become a norm in video game culture and almost to be like the rule and not the exception, I think is very telling about this culture that has been created in these spaces. I'm sorry, but like harassment and racial slurs should not be normalized like anywhere. Like that's not something we should just get used to, So that's one reason women, generally speaking, are more hesitant to assert themselves as gamers. There's the hostility of of women in the gaming space. There's also the connection with the nerd identity of being sort of overly intellectual, obsessive, and socially awkward. That identity is typically more associated with men than with women. I think it's more socially acceptable in that sort of ways, and that's kind of, you know, changing. Like, we see more like quirky girl, awkward girl representation, but that could also be another factor for some women. I think the invisibility of women also sort of contributes to this. This is definitely changing, but there is a lack of like highly visible female role models in this gaming industry. And I say highly visible, I mean at like a high level. When you think of professional gamers, for example, you might think of like the Ninjas or the PewDiePies or like, you know, other white male figures, and you don't necessarily think of like women, or you don't always see women at that same high level and that same success. So the lack of female role models, I think, at a high level can also be contributing to that. Obviously, like, there are a ton of women in gaming, but it's hard to like find them. You have to dig a little deeper to find that representation. In my comments, somebody said that she still struggles to find female streamers, and let alone streamers that she really enjoys watching. And then the last reason I found why females may be more hesitant to assert themselves as a gamer is because their connection to gaming may be through a sibling or a male friend or like a romantic partner. And so some people discredit your relationship to someone who enjoys gaming as like negating you being a gamer yourself, which is, of course, you know, bullcrap, but that is another factor.
Female gamers have to play twice as hard and twice as good at a game in order to prove that we belong somewhere.
Female players are still not recognized beyond their roles as mothers, girlfriends, and casual gamers, and typically have to face or avoid, you know, gender-specific harassment. So due to these reasons and more, I think society at large has internalized this idea of being female and being a gamer as being fundamentally incompatible. So now this leads me to the phenomenon or the rise of the girl gamer. So Faya in my comments, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but she continues to say that there's also this issue of labeling women as gamer girls. The way that people react to that label just feels extremely belittling to me, and I cannot agree more. A lot of times when you say girl gamer or female gamer, it's used to like an irony, like to make fun, which we're not, you know, we don't rock with that. In my opinion, using the word gamer girl is giving me very like not like other girls energy. One of my favorite commentary channels actually made a really good video exploring the not like other girls trope, meme, whatever you want to call it. I'll insert a few clips here.
In this patriarchal society, women and their interests are typically valued less. Therefore, the phrase "not like other girls" refers to the avoidance or rejection of stereotypically girly traits. And thus it is solidified, not like other girls is a good thing, and other girls are bad.
And so yeah, that just reminds me of like why we use the term gamer girl is because, again, like societally we have internalized girls can't possibly be interested in like boy activities. So it's almost feeding into the idea that if you are a gamer, you're either not like other girls or you're a girl gamer. I think this kind of shows a example of a feeling like you have to choose between your femininity or your gamer identity.
As a girl, you can be made fun of for being too girly, and you can also be made fun of for not being girly enough.
Just speaking on my own experience with this whole like not like other girls trope, I remember like growing up when I was a kid, a lot of my friends in like elementary school were like tomboys, and so for some reason I felt like I had to be like that. When I was younger, I used to call myself a female gamer, and honestly the reason I did is because, again, I was under that impression that like being feminine and liking feminine things and also enjoying gaming or things that we consider masculine are incompatible and can't go with each other. When I started to find creators on YouTube that express both sides of them, the sides that are like feminine and girly but also enjoy video games, to me I saw that as like a sense of pride, which is why like I adopted that term female gamer. It kind of showed me that girls and women can be multidimensional and multifaceted. So that's personally for me why I adopted that term female gamer when I was younger. I don't think I use that much anymore because, again, I think it kind of perpetuates an idea that like girl gamers are somehow different from just gamers as opposed to just seeing us as a unit and we're just all gamers.
Games are not gender specific, and you can play whatever game you like. If you like shooters, play shooters. If you do like dress-up games, play good ones, at least.
So the rise of the term girl gamer, I think also leads to the kind of problematic rise of like girl games and like the girl gamer marketing identity, which companies would like make all their equipment pink, or like to market a game to girls that had to be pink and girly and about like fashion or makeup or what we oftentimes associate with girl games. And honestly, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. Like, I think we should just have they should just be games. They shouldn't just be really marketed as games just for girls, because again, the gender constructs can become problematic. But it leads to like an interesting dichotomy where it's like, if you are a girl and like gaming, it's like you must like all your equipment in pink and you must only be interested in these girly games with these girly themes that are perceived to have the least amount of skill, like maybe creativity or something like that. So that's, I feel like, the category of the girly gamers. And then we just have the real gamers that just happen to be girls. So this is people that maybe play those hardcore games like we listed before, like MMOs or first person shooters. Typically this girl may be considered like one of the guys, kind of implying that, well, to like these real games, you have to reject your femininity altogether. Instead of just seeing us as a spectrum, I think oftentimes we're just women and girl gamers are kind of put into a group instead of seen as individuals. I can like to have all pink equipment if I want to. Hey, I bought this recently. This is my Nintendo Switch controller. Got it in baby pink. But I didn't buy that because I'm a girl. I bought that because I, as an individual, just like the color pink. That has nothing to do with me being female. Yes, we should just all see girls as individuals and not as a group, and all of these different categories of gamers are not mutually exclusive. You don't have to reject your femininity to enjoy gaming, but you also don't have to be super feminine to like gaming either. Like, we should just see people as individuals and not as like groups or categories. I think another aspect of identity that also hinders people from calling themselves a gamer is their racial identity. And I found this tweet from Xmiramira. It's actually like a couple years old, but I saw this Twitter thread that I thought brought up an interesting point, so I wanted to share it. So Mira is specifically a Sims creator. She mainly makes content on The Sims 4, but you can kind of apply what she's saying to like any game, but that's just what she's referring to for clarity's sake. As Black people, we need to stop hiding what we love from the people around us. We need to show up and show out. Another reason I made TBS, which is a show she was on, The Sims Sparked. How was the staff supposed to know we're here if everyone is keeping their Sims addiction a secret? Even with the amazing growth this community has seen in the past year, I still see people discussing how they're embarrassed to let their friends, families, colleagues know about their love for this game. Why? We can't ask for inclusiveness and diversity while hiding the fact that we love this game too. Now, honestly, I didn't really realize how my racial identity also kind of contributed to me being hesitant to call myself a gamer until the events of 2020, but also like reading this thread, and it kind of made me realize that this is an issue kind of bigger than just me. Like, this is an issue that other people of color experience as well. Obviously, I'm not the spokesperson for all people of color. I can just speak of my own experience and what some other people might have experienced, but I do think this is an important factor. Whether or not you consider yourself a gamer, racial identity can play into it. I think if we revisit a quote from earlier on in this research paper I've been referencing, there's this quote that says, the gamer identity is often connected to the nerd identity of being overly intellectual, obsessive, and socially awkward, which is typically associated with men rather than women. And I also think, in addition to that, the sort of awkwardness or quirkiness in like nerd stereotype is also often associated with white people, and not, I'm gonna speak for myself, Black people. Like, Black people are kind of taught to be like cool and we're the trendsetters, but when it comes to like nerdy things, we're not often seeing Black people represented in positions that seem intellectual or seem nerdy or seem geeky, as much as we are represented doing stuff like sports and like entertainment. I'm talking about Black people because I myself am a Black woman. I'm not gonna go into every single racial identity and how they conflict or not, but particularly speaking as a Black person, where you're kind of seen, your race is kind of seen as like a status symbol and like the epitome of cool, to not be seen as that can also be a force of pressure and like disassociation from the gaming community or industry in general. So there's a lot of invisibility of people of color, especially Black people, and for a variety of reasons, but some of those could be some of the reasons. There's also like having financial access to video games. There's like having role models in the industry, which I said, peer support, privilege just in general, also all tie into like the racial disparities in gaming. So I will actually talk more about this in my next video essay, which will be coming out in the coming weeks. I'm going to be speaking more about the intersection of being a gamer and also being Black in that video, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. I actually want to end with this quote. This is by Brene Brown in her book called The Gifts of Imperfection, the 10-year edition. May we create a just and equitable world where privilege isn't a prerequisite for self-expression and authenticity, where everyone feels invited and safe to express their power and vulnerability. But to end off for real, we're gonna now explore, what is a real gamer? I think we've established the stereotype of a gamer, how it came to be, the different facets and factors that cause a lot of people to disassociate themselves from that term gamer. What is a gamer today, and why do people play video games? I found this article from The Guardian. It was written in 2017. And they interviewed like a ton of different people from different backgrounds about why they game. We have some similar themes like connection with family and friends. Like there's an example of a mom who wanted to get closer to her son, so they bonded through gaming. Another reason people game is for relaxation and to decompress. Gamers today game to find community. This article gave an example of a graphic design student who had a physical disability. In-person socializing becomes a strain on her physically, a lot of the times due to her disability. So going out all the time isn't always the most comfortable or easiest for her. So one way she's been able to build community is through live streaming on Twitch. And then there was another theme of some people who really dislike the intellectual rigor or like the strategy or challenge of gaming. And of course, again, that's completely valid too. The whole point of this video is not to demean anyone who is a real gamer. This is kind of meant to lift up those people who kind of feel like they're not real gamers as well, you know? I think in my opinion, something I'd add to this list is creative expression. I found that gaming is a huge way that I found I could express myself creatively. And then when I started playing The Sims, like I really enjoyed like telling stories and like coming up with storylines and having, you know, the plot thicken. I also really enjoy story-driven, decision-based games. That's been something I've been really into, and I love the idea of connection and like empathy that comes from telling these stories and the greater like lessons we can learn from video games. So those are some of the reasons I really enjoy gaming. So I feel like in general, the public has become more accepting and tolerant of a wider scope of what a gamer is. So despite, you know, random Reddit dude earlier, of course, there are those people who think this way. But at the end of the day, like no matter what games you play or how much time you spend playing them, we all game for the same reasons: to challenge us, inspire us, to relax, and connect us with others. And the social construct of what makes a real gamer is extremely limiting and divisive, and can't accurately depict the vast diversity within the gaming community and the wide spectrum that we all fall upon. We also have to understand that the many social issues that exist within the gamer identity, such as racism, racial bias, ableism, misogyny, are all internalized, and we don't necessarily have to be conscious of them to partake in these systemic issues within our games. I think it's important to hold our friends and people around us accountable when they may say something that may have been insensitive or belittling to someone in the gaming space. Something that I've been trying to do more confidently with people I know in real life is kind of claiming that title gamer and sharing my interest in gaming, even with people who don't necessarily play games or that may not be a world they're interested in. Speaking up with things that we like, even if it may not be what society associates with us, in itself is a revolutionary act. The more that we, I think, show up in the world as our full selves, we dismantle that stereotype of what a gamer is or should be. So let me know, what do you guys think? And what has been your experience in the gaming industry? I would love to, have a civil conversation in the comments down below. What did you learn today? My name is Asmara, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.